We all have a relationship with money, right? But what's fascinating is how different that relationship can look. For some of us, it's all smooth, digital, just a tap away. For others, it's a world of cash, and it's complicated. So what if there was a map, a way to see this entire financial landscape clearly? Well, today that's exactly what we're going to explore.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. How banked are you really? I mean, do you have one bank account? Maybe a few? Or are you operating completely outside that system? Where you land on this spectrum isn't just a fun fact about you. It's actually the key to unlocking the biggest challenges and, more importantly, the biggest opportunities in finance today. And here it is. This is our map for the journey, the financial inclusion spectrum. Think of it as a framework that slices our financial world into 5 totally distinct groups. We're going to go all the way from people who are completely excluded from the system to those who are practically drowning in it. And trust me, understanding this spectrum is everything if you're trying to figure out where finance is headed. Okay, so let's start on the far left of our map. We're diving into the first massive opportunity for fintech innovators, the unbanked. These are the folks who are completely on the outside, looking in.
But hang on, before we even get to the unbanked, we have to talk about the real ground zero, the non-banked. This isn't someone who chooses not to have a bank. These are people like kids or infants who literally have no legal right to open an account. And what's crucial to get here is that this is a legal issue, a developmental challenge. It's not something a cool new app can just fix.
All right, now let's talk about the unbanked. These are adults who absolutely could have a bank account, but for a whole bunch of reasons, they just don't. We're often talking about marginalized communities, new immigrants, maybe even students. Their entire financial world runs on cash, and when they need financial services, they're turning to places like check cashing centers or payday lenders. The mindset here? It's usually deep-seated distrust of the whole traditional banking system.
So if you're a fintech, how in the world do you reach this group? Well, the playbook isn't about packing in more features. It's about building from the absolute ground up. First, you have to make the product unbelievably simple and intuitive. Then, you have to educate and empower your users, not just assume they know the lingo. Trust is everything, so partnering with community nonprofits is huge, and you absolutely need real human support paired with smart, accessible tech.
Now here's where things get really interesting. You might think the next group on our spectrum is pretty similar, but they need a completely different strategy. And this quote nails it. Being unbanked and underbanked are not the same problem at all.
And that brings us to our second huge opportunity, the underbanked. These are people who are technically in the financial system, but they're not really getting what they need from it.
So, what does an underbanked person look like? Well, they have a bank account, but that's kind of where it stops. They might use it to get a direct deposit from work or maybe pay a utility bill, but for pretty much everything else, they're back to using cash or other services. They're skeptical of banks, and they face all sorts of barriers. Maybe it's age, maybe they're not comfortable with tech, or maybe they just live too far from a physical branch.
The playbook here is all about bridging that gap between having an account and actually using it. It all starts with really, truly understanding their specific needs. From there, you can create tailored products, maybe with lower fees. You have to remove every little bit of friction you can find. And the goal is to build that foundational trust by making security a top priority and ensuring the whole thing is super accessible, especially on a smartphone. Now let's move to the very center of our map. This is where we find the banked. And let me tell you, this is the incumbents' kingdom. These are the customers the big banks have on lock. They're active, they're happy, they're using all the services. For fintech to even think about competing here, they can't just be a little better. They have to be revolutionary. It is a tough nut to crack.
So this brings us to the other end of the spectrum, and honestly, this might be the most surprising part of the whole map. Because here, the problem isn't a lack of access to banking, it's having way too much. Let's talk about the overbanked.
The overbanked are probably people you know. They're tech-savvy, they're digital natives, they juggle accounts at multiple banks, always hunting for the best deal. But here's the paradox. Even though they're using all the financial services, they're often completely overwhelmed. They can't budget, they're struggling with debt, and sometimes their credit scores are a mess, all because their financial life is just too complex.
So for a fintech, the answer isn't to offer them another new shiny account. No way. The real opportunity is to bring order to their financial chaos. The playbook here is all about taming that complexity. We're talking about using open banking to pull all their accounts into one simple view. It means offering smart ways to consolidate debt. And it means using tech to give them the kind of expert advice that helps them rebuild their finances and form better habits.
Okay, so we've traveled all the way across the spectrum, from total exclusion to complete oversaturation. So what's the big picture here? Where is the real frontier for innovation in finance?
This matrix really pulls everything together beautifully. Look here. For the unbanked, the challenge is access and trust, and the opportunity is to basically create a new front door to the financial system. For the underbanked, the challenge is that services aren't good enough, so the opportunity is to deepen that relationship. And for the overbanked, the challenge is complexity and debt, making the core opportunity all about simplification and consolidation. See the pattern?
And this brings us to the most powerful idea of all. While all the big banks are fighting tooth and nail over that happy customer in the middle, the real value, the real future, is being created at the edges. The true frontier for FinTech is building access for those who've been left out and creating simplicity for those who are completely overwhelmed by it all.
Which really leaves us with one big question to think about. For years, we've heard that FinTech is all about disrupting the banks, but maybe that was just the opening act. Maybe the real story, the future of finance, is less about disruption and a whole lot more about meaningful inclusion and simplification. What do you think?